background and why I might have a little bit of authority to speak on the subject, having been an addict for 20 years of my life prior to becoming a Christian. And talked a little bit about the people that got involved with me and that helped introduce me to the gospel, that it wasn't just a preacher, it was several people involved with me. And the basic premise was that it's going to take all of us. I will tell you now, the world does not care about our kids. The world doesn't care about your kids. The world doesn't care about us. And so I don't mean to sound like it's us against the world, but literally, in this regard, it is. There are so many things against our children when it comes to addiction. There are so many things that influence a lot of the decisions that get made that lead to addiction. There are so many factors that figure in and outside forces. And as I said last night, Satan doesn't wait. We love the idea of the age of accountability, but Satan doesn't know what that is. Satan could care less, and he comes for us when he thinks we can, and sometimes it's when we're children. And so tonight, kind of piggybacking off of that introduction last night, I want to talk about this slide behind me. It says, "Not my kid." This is something that working with addicts that I do. I work with a lot of addicts, and I work with a lot of parents. I work with a lot of families in crisis. And this is always something that I hear. Oh, not my kid. No, you don't understand. My kid is the greatest. Well, we can all say that, right? We can all look at our kids and go, oh, no, 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 no. You don't understand. I've got the best kid in here. My kid is smarter than everybody. I see it all the time on Facebook where like a mother is just, oh, my son can tie his shoes by himself. And I'm like, well, he's 14. It's about time. But that's how we are with our kids. We love our kids. We support our kids. But then when it comes to accepting something that might not be favorable about them, it's hard, man. It is hard. No parent would ever want to believe that their kid would be involved in vandalism. Or no parent would ever want to believe that their kid was involved with something that got them sent home from summer camp. No parent ever wants to get that phone call that says, hey, your kid was caught tonight at 2 o'clock in the morning. They snuck out of your house. Nobody wants that. And so it's easy to understand then why no parent wants to hear your kid is an addict. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that their kid could ever be an addict. But I hear it more and more all the time. And last night, setting up my story, I had a picture of me up there whenever I was between 16 and 17. And I looked the part. I looked like an addict, right? I had the long hair, the leather jacket, and I had that whole rocker thing going on, that whole scene I was involved with. And so, you know, a lot of times you see someone like that and you're like, oh yeah, that guy for sure. I see kids all the time that look just like our kids. I see kids all the time. And sometimes they are our kids. And when I first moved here in 2013 to work with the church at Fultondale, some version of my story had circulated a little bit about the new preacher at Fultondale that has a mohawk and preaches in jeans. And a little bit of the background got out. Oh yeah, he used to be in a band. Oh, he was a drug addict. And while that might have scared a lot of people off, which was fine, I don't ever want to make anyone uncomfortable unless you need to be made uncomfortable. But this one particular family was in crisis. And for years, they had always said, well, no, not my kid. Until it was their kid. And Will Munkus was that kid. His mother reached out to me. As a matter of fact, I'm not kidding, on August the 5th. 2013. That's today. And that's why I wanted to present this lesson tonight. August the 5th, 2013, I was about to go on a family vacation. Oddly enough, with my soon-to-be son-in-law, who was not even dating my daughter at the time. He was just going as a friend with our older son. And we were headed down to Orange Beach for the week, and his mom called, and she goes, "My son's in trouble." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" And she said, "Well, apparently he's been an addict for a lot of years, and we just didn't want to accept it. But now he's living in his car. He's been kicked out of the military, and we don't know what to do." I said, "Well, you caught me as I'm leaving out of town right now." I was like, is there an emergency right now that I need to stop the trip for?" And she said, no, just go on out of town. I think he's talking about checking himself in to Brookwood. I said, "Okay, well, keep me posted." So we go to the beach, we come back. I give her a call, and she said, "He checked in last night." She goes, "Would you go down and talk to him?" I said, "Absolutely." And remember my quote last night that I'm going to say often through this series this weekend. Eyes that look are common. Eyes that see are rare. Now, the reason that's important tonight is because I walked into Brookwood Medical Center in the psychiatric ward with eyes that looked only. Because I walked in looking for the heroin addict. I walked in looking for the kid that looked like my picture last night, the one that fit the part. I walked in looking for the scraggly, unhealthy looking, literally on his last thread of life kid. And that's not who I saw. This quote sticks out to me. It says, "There's no point in using the word impossible to describe something that's clearly happened." When we say "not my kid," that's what we mean. It's impossible. And yet it's something that's clearly happened. And so I walk into Brookwood Medical, and this is who I see. I'm looking for the heroin addict. It's not him. That kid's all-American. That kid looks like all the kids at camp that I was just at. And as a matter of fact, Will grew up going to camp. "What are you doing here?" is what I said. I was like, you don't belong here. Now, in truth, nobody belongs there. But I'm looking at him with eyes that looked only. I couldn't see him. He said, "It's me." And so we sat and we talked. And he said, "I've always struggled." He said, "Since I was a kid, I've had trouble mentally. And the first time I smoked pot, it took that away from me." He said, "And then the first time that I drank, it took that away from me. And then the first time I got into some of my mom's pills that she takes for things, it took that away from me. And I just couldn't stop because I just wanted those things taken away from me." I said, "Well, did you ever tell your parents?" He said, "I tried." You know what they said? "Not my kid." And sometimes it was framed in the sense of denial that no, not my kid, he could never. That quickly turned into, "Not my kid. You ain't gonna live here and do that. We got rules in this house, buddy." So he's living in his car, shooting heroin. Because no son of mine is gonna do that. He'd been baptized. He still believed in God, but he knew that he had been away from the Lord. I said, "Look, what do you want to do, Will?" I was like, "I don't know you, you don't know me, but I want to help. And if you want me to, I'm all in." And he said, "I want to come back to the Lord." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, repent." And so we prayed together. And I grabbed his hand, and he repented. And I believe in that moment, what the Bible says, he was restored. He was reconciled to God. And I said, "When you get out of here, I want you to come see me at Fultondale." He said, "Okay, I will." Now, I walked out of Brookwood believing I would not see him again. Because working with addicts the way that I do, I get told that all the time. Yes, sir, preacher, we'll see you Sunday. And I'll never see them until the next time they're in trouble. Well, that Sunday, in walks Will. And I give the invitation after my sermon, and Will comes forward. I said, hey, dude, what's up? He said, I just need you to tell these people what's going on with me. I said, brother, you already repented. He said, no, I want you to tell them what's going on with me. I want you to tell them that I'm a heroin addict and I want to get clean. And they all need to know what's going on with me. And man, I was moved by that because this was real. This wasn't a, I need you to pray for me, I've got sin in my life type confession. This was real. This was detailed. He wanted them to know what his problem was, what they needed to pray for, and to help hold him accountable. It wasn't an unspoken prayer request, it was fully spoken. It was confession, which that's another lesson that we really should touch on at some point. Because I'll suggest to you, a congregation that doesn't confess one to another is a congregation that might not understand the gospel. But that's another lesson. And so I get up and I begin to tell the congregation what Will's going through, and I just lose it. Because it was the first real honesty that I'd seen in a long time. Where someone was just clearly willing to be vulnerable because they don't want to be sick anymore. They truly didn't want it to be their kid. He didn't want to be that kid. And so we welcomed him in. And so I go to Steve Wilshire, one of our elders, and I'm like, Steve, do you have anything that Will can do for work? He's living in his car right now. And, I've offered to let him live with us, but he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to be burdened. But he doesn't want to work. I said, the problem is, I don't want him to get cash. He needs like gift cards, that sort of things, where he can get gas, he can get food, but he can't buy drugs. Last time I checked, drug dealers don't take Visa. So Steve says, you know what? He goes, I've needed this addition on the back of my house re-roofed. Why don't y'all do that? So in the August heat, Will and I decided to re-roof Steve Wilshire's addition. And those are some of those brutal days in my life history that I can think of. But they were some of the best days because in those days, Will and I got to talk every day. And I got to find out more about what would take this kid into that place. And I began to see. No, I was no longer just looking at Will. I could see him. And I saw him fight. I saw the days where it wanted him so bad and he was struggling. He just wanted to leave me. He's like, hey man, can I take your truck into that? I'm like, no, you can't. And I could see it, man, him fighting it and just wanting to go get away from me and go use. And I'd see him win. I'd seen him win those moments. So for 88 days, that's what we did. I had to preach a gospel meeting in Chillicothe, Ohio. And so I was gone. I was like, are you going to be okay? Do you want to go with me? No, I'll be good. I'll be all right. Come on, man, it'll be fun. Road trip. No, really, I don't want to, I don't want to be a burden to the family you're staying with. I was like, too late. They've already got me. It's already going to be a burden. I get a phone call on the night that I'm driving home. I'm in Nashville. It's about 9 o'clock. And it's Will's mom. And she says, hey, Will used today. I said, okay. I said, listen, I said, I made a deal with him in the beginning. She goes, well, what was that? I said, well, the deal was you're going to use again. You're an addict. That's what addicts do. Addicts use. What I need you to do, Will, is tell me when you do. Tell me what, so that I know who I'm dealing with. I just need you to tell me. And you know what? We're going to hit the reset button and we're going to start over. Okay? Fair enough? So she hands me the phone and it's Will. And he's a mess. I mean, because he's audibly high. Because his words are really slurred, but he's also a mess because he's crying. He's upset. He knew that he messed up. I said, you know what? I'm coming straight to your house. I'll be there in about 2.5 hours. And so I get to their house about midnight. I go into his room and he's sitting there and he's just pitiful. I said, brother, nothing's changed. I still love you. And we're going to get through this. I said, we're going to need to get up in the morning. I said, they're not going to let you in right now. We're going to need to get up in the morning and go back down to Brookwood and, get you on some Suboxone and get this out of your system so that you don't get sick. We need to keep that from happening. And he said, he goes, I think I've done too much, though. He goes, I'm going to be sick anyway. I was like, well, then you're going to be sick. I said, but there's nothing we can do about it right now. You just need to go to sleep. And so we cried. We prayed again. And he repented again. And I left and I went home. My phone goes off at 7 that morning and it says, Mom, he's dead. She said she went in to check on him and he was blue. She couldn't wake him up. Camille, I'm on my way. So I get over there before the sheriff or anybody. I've never seen grief like that. It'll affect you. See a mother agonizing. And she was saying, not my son. Not my son. I'd never changed anything before. Saying that now is not going to change it either. And we had to remove her from the room because she wouldn't leave. And we sat with her the rest of that day. And for the coming weeks. And his funeral was the hardest one I've ever had to preach. Not because I don't think he went to heaven. Will repented before he went to sleep. I know where Will is. But because he wanted to do so many things that he was now not going to get to do, and I couldn't see at the time, I didn't have eyes that could see again, that from his funeral, there would be 7 young men that wanted to get clean also. 3 of those are still clean today. 2 of them are faithful Christians. And so Will did have an impact, just not the way that he thought. Will didn't grow up a statistic. He grew up in a good home. He grew up attending services his whole life. He was taught the gospel. He went to FC Alabama camp. He was a baptized believer. And yet, he still became an addict. Sometimes we don't want to see it. Not my kid. Not my kid. Never. Both parents, God present in the home. Again, Satan doesn't wait. And kids don't hide their happiness, but they will hide their depression. And so again, we have to have eyes that see, not just look. We have to be willing to accept, my kid might be depressed. My kid might struggle. And my job is not to deny that that exists, but to get involved. Accepting it does not mean embracing it. It means confronting it. And so what I want to leave you with are a couple things tonight that we became aware of from Will. And the first thing was his friends. When he was in high school and began to show signs of rebellion, by drinking, by staying out too late, by disobeying his parents. There was a group that was associated with that. Group of kids he hung out with. A couple of them members of the church. A couple of them not. And I say that to say that it's not that I don't want our kids to be friends with kids who aren't Christians, because those kids need our kids. But I'll tell you this, it's a whole lot easier to pull someone down than it is for our kids to pull someone up. And so we have to be aware of who their friends are. 1 Corinthians 15:33, a verse I know we know well, says, do not be deceived. You know what you could also say is, don't be in denial. Bad company ruins good morals. And for Will, that was an early sign. Hanging out with the wrong crowd, even if they're members of the church. Every year at FC Alabama Camp, this year we had 405 campers. Every year, we have to send somebody home. Just because our kids are Christians, or just because our kids are growing up in the church and maybe not Christians yet, does not mean that they're not going to make mistakes. It doesn't mean they're not going to have problems. It doesn't mean that they won't be a source of great heartache for us. And simply dismissing it, saying, well, not my kid, doesn't change it. We have to first, if we're going to truly see them, be aware of who their friends are. Be aware of who their friends are, and then check their phones. Man, I don't want to hear, I hear all the time, well, I would never want to invade on their privacy. They're your kids. They don't have privacy. That doesn't work in my house. If I'm paying your phone bill, I will pick your phone up whenever I want to. And I will look in all of it. Bet. Because I love you. Because I want to see what's influencing you. And our kids are on their phones more and more all the time. And listen, adults are just as bad. We go out to eat all the time, and I'll see a whole table, a whole family, all of them. I'm like, you're right there with your family. And they've all got their phone in their face. But our kids, by and large, and especially after the lockdowns where kids were stuck at home for a year and a half in some cases, that's our only connection with the outside world. And y'all, we have to be aware of the mental health of our kids and what being stuck at home has done to them. Check their phones. See what influences they're engaging in. Check their social media platforms. Check their text messages. See what's coming in. Proverbs 12, verse 16. The writer says, the vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. Whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence, but a false witness utters deceit. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrust, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. All these verses about the lips and the tongue, one of the greatest struggles that our kids face, one of the things that will absolutely send them into the throes of addiction that Satan will absolutely use is bullying. When I was a kid, bullying took place in person. At least the bullies then had a little bit of guts, because they'd have to say it to your face. Now kids hide behind their keyboards, behind their phones, and they destroy other kids. And they destroy their self-esteem, and they destroy their self-worth, and they destroy their reputations. Check their phones. And then pay attention to this. Pay attention to how much time they want to spend with you. Now listen, I know that no teenagers want to be seen with their parents anywhere. I get that. But at some level, there still should be some engagement with the family. I think a good thermometer for that is whether or not you eat together. There's something special about the dining room table. There is more gospel that can be preached from the dining room table than there ever can in an auditorium. Because on a night like tonight, I'm the only one speaking. But at my dining room table, everybody has a voice. Tell me about your day. Tell me what's going on with you. Hey, you know what? Let me share something with you. And you can have a discourse. And when kids more and more want to pull away from that, and sometimes that looks like the church too, they pull away from coming to church events. I've known kids that once they hit senior in high school, freshman in college, they stop coming to Bible class. And they start pulling more and more away. I can't help but think about the prodigal son in Luke 15. We read this sometimes, and we read it in a hurry. Verse 11 says, and he said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that's coming to me, and he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had, and he took a journey to a far-off country and squandered his property in reckless living. You know what we sometimes fail to see? It's the progression. I highly doubt in this story that he just woke up one day and said, you know what, I'm out of here. That begins little by little. Now, the text doesn't say that. But in real life, that's how it happens. Nobody just decides one day to get up and move. They begin to pull away. They begin to spend less time with the family. They begin to care less about spiritual things. And if the people they're hanging out with and the things that they're being influenced by on their phones and social media are the type of things we're talking about, this is the next logical step in the progression. They begin to pull away. And so we have to be aware. We have to pay attention. And then notice their behavior. Notice the things that they do. Luke 6, verse 45 says, the good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. When our kids begin to act out, it's because something has changed. Something's different. And maybe it's his friends. Maybe it's the social media influence that he's under. And maybe it's begun this progression of thinking, well, you know what, I just can't wait to get out of here, which breeds discontent and breeds disrespect for his family. Something in the heart has changed. There's been a change of heart. And oftentimes, this is where we begin to say, not my kid. My kid knows. Yeah, they know. That doesn't mean they'll stay. What it means is that they won't talk to you. Will said that he never could talk to his mom because she would just get upset. He tried several times to talk with her and tell her, and she would just get upset. And so he stopped trying. If our kids don't think they can talk to us, they won't. If we become unapproachable because we rule with the fist, they don't trust us. They don't feel safe. And so we have to be aware and see the behaviors. Truly see it. Don't just look at it and deny it. See it. And then this one's for us. In Matthew 26, verse 70. But he denied it before them all, saying, I don't know the man. I don't know what you mean. And he went out to the entrance of another servant girl, saw him, and said to the bystanders, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied it with an oath, saying, I do not know the man. And after a little while, the bystanders came up to and said to Peter, certainly you too are one of them. Your accent betrays you. But he said, and invoked a curse on himself and to swear, I do not know the man. And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. And he went out and he wept bitterly. Most of the time when we're in denial, All the evidence is right there. And we say, no, not true. And someone can say, yeah, but look at this. And we're like, nope. No, really, you need to pay attention. Nope. Not my kid. And friends, what I want us to avoid is the rooster crowing. Because then we're going to weep bitterly. We can't be in denial. Yes, it could be your kid. It could be my kid. And so if they're already there, and you're trying to help them escape the clutches and the cravings of addiction, you can't force it. That's the frustrating part. I wish I could take every addict that I work with and put them in a headlock and just make them do what I say. I wonder how often God wishes he could do that with us too. But that's not what God does either. God will never twist our arm up behind our back and force us to love him or obey him. What he does say is, come, all that labor, and I'll give you rest. And I'll suggest to you that our kids, if they're already in this situation, that's what they need. Rest. They don't need denial. They don't need punishment. Trust me, they're already feeling it. And so remember this. Remember faith, hope, and love. This is what they need. This is what they need. Faith keeps us, the parents, focused on the right thing during the hard times. The nights when we're sitting up, wondering where they are. Faith is the only thing that gets us through those nights. And when they come in and they're wasted, faith is what keeps me from killing them. I said this at dinner. In regards to my wife, I make this joke all the time. The same reason I stay married to my wife is the same reason I don't kill her. God said, stay married, and he said, don't kill your wife. Well, that also applies to my kids. That in those moments where I've been so upset that I just want to let them have it, that's not what they need in that moment. And that's not going to gain their trust. And so faith keeps us focused on the right thing in hard times. And then hope. Hope may be the glue that holds the whole thing together. And as parents, we will have to have hope because the addict that we love may have none. And friends, I'll just be frank with you. 1 Corinthians 13 is the only place in Scripture that I know of where these three are put in that order. The emphasis is usually on hope. Because, yeah, one day we'll be in heaven and we'll know what love is. But until then, hope is all we got. And the truth is if our kid is already on the way to being an addict or already an addict, what they need is hope. They need to believe they can beat this. They need to believe that you believe they can beat this. Because they might not have any for themselves. And then obviously we will need love. We will need love more than you might believe that you're capable of giving. It'll require everything from you because it's hard to love an addict. I've got a lesson about what my wife means to me because of what she went through with me. It is the perfect picture of what love is. But it's not a beautiful picture. It's a mess. It's hard to love an addict. And that becomes especially difficult if it's our kids. It's hard to love someone who lives a code of rampant self-absorption and self-destruction. It's hard to love when lies and deceit are given. Y'all, addicts will protect their addiction. They'll lie to you. They'll fight you. They'll deny. They'll steal. And yet, you've got to love them in spite of that. That's what love really is, by the way. Love isn't supposed to be easy. And that's what it requires. It's hard to love an abuser of mercy and kindness. The Bible tells us in 1 Peter 4:8, love covers a multitude of sins, but it feels like love just as easily enables sin in the addict. And so we get stuck in this place where I know this is the right thing to do, but I'm afraid if I do this, this is going to happen. I know that I need to give some consequences, but I don't want to push them away. I know that I need to draw some lines and create some boundaries, but I don't want to lose them in the process of doing that. And that turmoil, where your guts are all messed up, that's love. I can't imagine what God must have felt as his son hung on the cross, paying for all of our mess. I can't imagine that felt good, and yet that's what he said love was. That he so loved the world. He didn't just love the world, y'all. He so loved. Have you ever so loved something? Well, God so loved us. And that feeling in the pit of your stomach, that's it. It's not the warm and fuzzies. It is the fortitude to do what's right when you don't want to. And to love an addict, it will take all you got. To love an addict is to invite pain. Because love gets trampled by sin. Love gets mocked by sin. But that's the point. That's the point of love. Love was crucified by sin. But by love, it's overcome. And sin is no more. And so, if love is the most important in that equation, then we don't get to say, not my kid. We get to say, yeah, that's my kid, and I love him, and I'm going to help this situation. It's hard, and it's messy. And I don't know if Will Munkus was ever going to be okay. But I know this. I know that in retrospect, in the conversations that I've had with his wonderful parents, and they are, please don't misunderstand anything that I've said tonight. His parents loved him dearly. They just didn't know how to deal with an addict. Which is why I'm so glad that we're doing this. Yes, it could be our kid. And we have to be ready to have faith, to give hope, and to love them through it. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope that this story has been of some benefit to you. I'm glad that the kids weren't here to hear it. It's not a good story. But I'm thankful that you were. And I hope that if nothing else, I've given you something to think about and some questions to ask. Speaking of that, does anybody have any questions at this time? It's okay if you don't. It's a lot to take in. But again, I want to thank you for the opportunity. And that if you do have any questions, the elders and Greg know how to get a hold of me. You can get my phone number. You can call me. We can talk. Yes, sir. So that's probably the most important question, right? Is how to get started. Um, I think it's different with every kid, but I think there are some fundamental principles, right? And I think the first thing that needs to be said, because the questions might be different depending on the situation. I think we always want to know why. I think that's always the looming question. Well, why? Why would you do this? And the answer is probably going to be like, I don't know. But I think the most important part of that conversation is to first tell them that they're loved. And yes, I am very upset with you, but that they don't feel like they can't talk to you. Sometimes we start the conversation out with a lot of yelling and a lot of, hey, I'm really disappointed and this and this and this, and here's your consequences. Okay, now talk to me. Well, they're not going to talk to us at that point, right? And so I think the most important thing to do is right from the get-go is let them know that they're loved. And hopefully what will happen is that they'll open up to you. Sometimes the conscience hadn't been seared yet, and they're actually dying to tell you, right? But I don't really know what the first question would be because it could be different for every situation. I think why is always a good one. Can you tell me why? And maybe they don't know yet. Sometimes kids just do things, and there's not a real motivator behind it. But I think if it becomes something habitual, then there's definitely an underlying problem, and why is a valid question. So that's an excellent question. How to get started, I think, is super important. Any other questions? Well, thank y'all so much. If you think of anything, we got a question over here? Yes, sir. So when we get to that place where the conscience isn't working properly anymore, I think consistency is the approach. I love in 1 Peter 3 when Peter is giving advice to the women there in Jerusalem. The situation in this, it's not the same thing. So I'm going to make a principle application here. Women in Jerusalem at that time didn't dare take on a different religion than their husbands. But many of the women that he's addressing here were Christians and their husbands were still Jews. And so he says to them, likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that if some do not obey the word, they don't convert to Christianity. They may be won without a word by the conduct of your wives. And so I think in short, Peter's saying there, no matter what he's doing, you do what's right. And that you'll win them over by doing the right thing, showing consistency. And our kids are really perceptive, right? No one can point out your hypocrisy better than your kids, right? We see it all the time. We do something, and then we get onto them, and they're like, well, you do it, right? So kids see hypocrisy. Well, they also just as clearly see consistency. And so if they get to a place where their conscience is seared, what you say may have no effect on them because they're already dull to it. But they still see. They still see that you're doing the right things. They still see that you're following what it is that you're trying to teach them. And so I think in a situation where the conscience might be seared, consistency is what really works. Because if they can see that you still care enough to keep doing the right things no matter what they're doing, eventually, the idea, and even like the idea here, is that your actions will win them over. That maybe by your example, their conscience begins to work again. So, any other questions? Well, if you think of any, we've still got another couple days. And I'm easy to find, I'm easy to get a hold of. And so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. There's nothing off limits for me. There's nothing that you're going to say that's going to shock me, I promise. But I would love to help if there's anything I can help with. So thank y'all so much.